Hi, welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm going to go over the summary of the Legal Document Assistance Code. It's BPC 6400 through 6415. I'm going to go through the most important points, but if you want to know what the entire law says, go ahead and read the code. So, according to the Business and Professions Code, a legal document assistant is any person who provides for compensation any self-help service to the public who's representing themselves in a legal matter. The BPC rules were created with consumer protection in mind and create rules in order for the LDA to avoid engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. The code is split up into 3 sections. Article 1 goes into general provisions. Article 2 goes into registration requirements. And Article 3 goes into conduct of business and prohibited acts. So Article 1, Section 6400 through 6407 explains what the LDAs are authorized to do. An LDA is authorized to complete legal documents in a ministerial manner by typing or completing the documents at this person's specific direction. Another self-help service is providing general published factual information that has been written or approved by an attorney pertaining to legal procedures, rights or obligations to a person to assist that person in representing themselves. Also, an LDA is able to make published legal documents available to these persons. And finally, an LDA can file and serve the documents if directed by the consumer, of course. Generally, those are the 4 types of self-help services that an LDA is authorized to help with. So obviously LDAs are not attorneys and they can't give legal advice. They don't own law firms and they don't represent consumers in courts. A legal document assistant may not provide any kind of advice, explanation, opinion, or recommendation to a consumer about possible legal rights and remedies, defenses, options, selection of forms, or strategies. LDAs are only allowed to complete documents for self-represented litigants at their specific direction who are representing themselves in a legal matter. An LDA may not provide services to a consumer who requires the assistance of an attorney. An LDA should inform a potential client that they require the services of an attorney, and that's in Section 6401.6. Also, in Section 6401.7, it references a sunset clause. Pretty much a sunset clause is a date for when the profession can be eliminated, but ever since the enactment of the LDA statutes, it has been extended every couple of years. It's next set to sunset on January 1st, 2024. The BPC code carves out some exclusions regarding what types of persons do not need to register to become LDAs, and that can include persons that work for the government and do work under the course of their employment, nonprofit employees, real estate brokers, immigration consultants, or a person who provides services that are regulated by federal law, such as workers' compensation, personnel and state disability, and Social Security services, among others. And that's 6401 statutes A through I. So none of these rules were created to sanction, authorize, or encourage the practice of law by non-lawyers. Registration under this chapter or an exemption from registration does not immunize any person from prosecution or liability. That's 6401.5. Moving on to Article 2, registration requirements. That's Code 6402 through 6407. An LDA shall register with the county clerk in the county in which the LDA has their principal place of business and where they maintain a branch office. LDAs must provide proof that the registrant has filed a bond for a minimum of $25,000. A registrant may deposit the amount required by Subdivision A in cash with the county clerk. The LDA shall pay a $175 application fee to the county clerk, and the county clerk will issue an ID card, which is good for 2 years. Additional rules and costs apply for partnerships and corporations and companies with more than 10 employees. Through the application process, the applicant must disclose any disqualifications or any civil judgments or criminal convictions, or if the LDA registration has been revoked in the past. That's Section 6406. The Department of Consumer Affairs is responsible for developing the application and types of proof required to register as an LDA. Next, let's talk about education requirements. The BPC code lists out education requirements to become an LDA. In some instances, registrants can qualify depending on whether they have a high school diploma, a bachelor's degree, working under the supervision of an attorney, or whether or not they have a paralegal certificate approved by an American Bar Association or not. Also, continuing on regarding education, an LDA is required to have at least 15 hours of continuing legal education courses. Moving on to Article 3, Business and Professions Code, Section 6408 through 6415. This is the conduct of business and prohibited acts. Specifically, the rules state that the disclosures and advertising must state the registrant's name, business address, telephone number, registration number, and county of registration per the code. And it describes where those disclosures should appear. See Section 6408 of BPC Code. All advertisements published and broadcast shall state, I am an attorney. I can only provide self-help services at your specific direction. If the ad is in a language other than English, then that statement must be in that language too. All advertisements published and broadcast shall state, I am not an attorney. I can only provide self-help services at your specific direction. If the ad is in a language other than English, then that statement shall appear in that language too. No LDA can keep the client's original files. And per Section 6409, the venue for an action arising out of a dispute between a legal document assistant or unlawful detainer assistant and their client shall be the county in which the client has their primary residence. That's Section 6409.1 and also includes info from 6411. Next, let's go into the contract. The LDA must use a contract governed by the Department of Consumer Affairs. The contract needs to have the appropriate disclosures similar to those already referenced. The contract language shall be written both in English and in any other language comprehended by the consumers. The self-represented litigants have 24 hours to rescind and cancel the contract altogether if they choose to. See Section 6410 for more info. Per Section 6410.5, the LDA must have the consumer sign a notice to consumer. So in addition to having a contract, the LDA must provide the consumers with a notice to consumer that states that the LDA is not an attorney, that they are not a law firm, that they cannot represent consumers in court, that they can't give legal advice, that they cannot select legal forms, among other statements that protect the consumer. LDAs may not make false or misleading statements to the consumer, nor make any guarantee or promise. See Section 6410.5 for the exact written language that is the notice to consumer. Next, LDAs are prohibited from advertising with the words legal aid, legal services, or any similar term that has a capacity, tendency, or likelihood to mislead members of the public about that person's status as a nonprofit corporation or governmentally supported organization offering legal services without charge to indigent people or employing licensees of the state bar to provide those services. LDAs are not allowed to make misleading statements to the consumer or to imply in any way that the LDA has a special influence with state agencies. See Section 6411 for more information. Also, let's talk about the bond. The BPC code lists out additional rules about bond claims and replenishment of the bond when claims are paid and the deadline to do so before the registration is revoked. The penalties, relief, and remedies provided in this chapter are not exclusive and do not affect any other penalties provided by law. The BPC code sets out what happens when the LDA's registration is revoked. See Section 6412.5 for more info. An LDA may neither seek nor obtain a consumer's waiver of any of the provisions of this chapter because it's contrary to public policy and would be void and unenforceable. See Section 6412. The code also sets out what the discipline could entail for those that don't follow these provisions. That is, there would be fines and in some cases even imprisonment. So there you have it. That's a high-level overview of BPC 6400 through 6415, the Legal Document Assistance Code. Hopefully that gives you some information, but it does not replace you doing your own research to understand what your responsibilities are, what the restrictions are, and how you can go about doing this work without engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. Thanks for listening. Thanks.